My guests today are Jim Cocita and Sam Keenan. Jim is a managing director at Brown Gibbons Lang Company, where he focuses on environmental services across solid waste, specialty waste, and industrial services. Jim has nearly 2 decades of experience advising companies on M&A, recapitalizations, and strategic alternatives, and he's worked on some of the most transformative transactions in the industry, including GFL, Coastal Waste Recycling, and Circon. He was named a Waste 360 40 Under 40 award winner in 2024. And Sam is a managing director at Kinderhook and one of the firm's senior investing professionals in the environmental and industrial services sector. Sam has spent more than 15 years backing and building businesses across the space, helping scale companies like Capital Waste, Ecowaste, Apex Environmental, ACV Environmental, Circon, and Jack Doheny, among others. Kinderhook has long been one of the most active investors in environmental services, so he brings a front row view into how capital is being deployed and what the next generation of the platforms look like. Jim, Sam, thank you so much for joining me today. How are the both of you?
Doing well. Doing
great. Thanks for having us.
Good to hear it. I remind our listeners that I am so sick. So I'm going to power through reading some of this stuff. And if I had to take an extra pause here or there or pop a cough drop, just ignore me.
No offense here.
And you can't catch anything through the screen, luckily. So I'm going to be hacking up along on mute here in a second. Before we jump in and get started with the questions I have for you guys, I'd like to throw it to you, Jim, Sam. Can you give me a quick introduction about who you are, other than what I said here, and kind of introduce yourselves to the audience? Jim, we can start with you.
Certainly, yes. Yeah, thanks, Gage, and thanks for having us on here. So Jim Cocita, I'm a managing director, as you said, here at BGL. Have been lucky enough to work in the environmental sector here for going on, well, I guess 11 years. My entire time, frankly, with BGL. I've had the great pleasure of working with Sam pretty much from day one of joining BGL, honestly. So across the solid waste space, we've worked on stuff together, and into the special waste space. One of my favorite deals, which was Circon, we've got to work on together here. So great to be here, really is.
Excellent. Sam.
Yeah, so Sam Keenan, Managing Director at Kinderhook. I've been here for over 15 years. I started covering the sector actually going back to 2008, I guess technically when I was an intern at Kinderhook. So I went to my first Waste Expo then, and I've been kind of hooked on it and lucky enough to get to work in the space ever since, covering everything from solid and industrial and hazardous waste to kind of now our growing vertical around specialty industrial rental, which dovetails into the sector in a bunch of different ways. And it is a fun space because of the market dynamics we'll talk about today, and the absolute characters and great people you get to work with in the industry. And yeah, Jim and I, my wife was laughing about this last night because the amount of times that I'm on the phone on a Saturday or Sunday night really late talking through something with Jim, and it's been a pleasure to get to work with him over the years too. So this should be entertaining.
Awesome. Honestly, if I can just throw myself on mute, and you guys can just talk and talk. And
I don't know
It'll be mostly conversations about how his TRX is inferior to my Ford Raptor. So I don't know if our listeners are going to love that.
We don't have enough time for that.
Well, hey, listen, this recording can go as long as it needs to. I can walk away. I'll go get it. No problem. All right. So Sam, you had mentioned the market a little bit, and that's kind of where I want to start. So looking at 2025, it was a busy year for environmental services M&A. So I'm curious, from both of your vantage points, Jim as an advisor, Sam as an investor, how would you summarize the market that we saw and maybe today?
Sam, do you want me to go?
You kick it off. You're the advisor. I'll follow suit.
Oh, thank you. How would I summarize the market today? I would say 2025 was a super busy year. We saw, right, I think one of the most marquee deals that got done would have certainly been the GFL divestiture of their special waste business. That deal alone kind of, I think, shows the interest in. It's interesting to hear Patrick talked about it too at the Waste Today conference, where there's the traditionals, right? WM going into Steri. The Republic's been busy in the sector for sure, right? And then you have between US Ecology, ACV. But then the opposite happening with GFL spinning out the special waste business. However, I think that if you were to ask Patrick directly, he would say he didn't want to sell that. It's kind of the convergence of the traditional solid waste and the special waste worlds coming together. And I think you're going to see more of that moving forward with the more, higher, I don't want to call them, maybe marquee is not the right word, but the higher marquee assets, right, that are out there and operators and of scale. And it's a little bit more fragmented in the special waste world than it is in the solid waste world. And so as the majors chase growth, I think you'll continue to see them diversifying into those broader waste streams, non-traditional waste streams. And I think that's going to carry through 26 and beyond, quite honestly.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point, especially for the public guys, because I think, quite frankly, you've got this interesting challenge with, how they're going to continue to find ways to grow. Because on the solid waste side, you've seen a lot of consolidation over the last 5 or 10 years. So suddenly there's very few kind of chunkier assets, quite frankly, from a regional company perspective out there that the majors can sink their teeth into, and also don't have a conflict from a justice perspective. So you've got this environment suddenly where they're looking to diversify their revenue, which is great from a growth and specialty waste. But as importantly, they're still on the hunt for, what they can do in solid waste to grow. So I think year of consolidation for sure. You've also seen on our end a lot more of an interest in kind of continuation vehicles, funds and infrastructure funds kind of stepping into the space to take on assets that maybe the majors necessarily can't chase. And so that's been kind of both an exciting thing, but it's also created obviously a lot more competition in the space than was previously there, as more entrants from a capital perspective has entered to kind of compete with the majors.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Now, I guess talking about subsectors in the industry, like which ones stood out to you in 2025? Are we talking solid waste, recycling, industrial, hazardous? Why do you think that capital gravitated there?
Start, Sam, or you want me to go?
Yeah, so I'd say industrial and hazardous was probably the most interesting one to watch. I mean, Jim alluded to the Steri deal, which was, I think, a long time coming, quite frankly. There's a long-term play from a logistical advantage perspective. There's a diversification of revenue for waste management. Obviously, you saw a larger regional in the case of, Triumvirate, which was an exciting deal to see get done. Obviously what's going on with the Heritage Arcwood guys is got a lot of momentum behind it too, which is pretty exciting. So I'd say thematically, it seems like industrial and specialty waste is more of a focus area. I think people are, still really intrigued by the idea of kind of repositioning and beneficial reuse that can come out of those streams, how to recover more value and deliver something to the generators that they can talk about from kind of a, kind of full circle cyclicality perspective. So.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think that the one core tenet of the environmental world that has continued to play through, and we, frankly, take calls weekly, sometimes it seems like it's daily, from, capital looking to get into the space. And it's the, recurring, consistent, regulatory driven nature of the environmental space, whether it be the solid waste space or the more special waste. I think last year was certainly the year of special waste, relatively speaking. But like there were some pretty large scale deals that got done last year in the special waste space, and it tends to ebb and flow a little bit like that from year to year. But it certainly is. There's much more of a fragmented world on the special waste side. So I think that's why you're starting to see the more and more activity from the majors going into that world. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess I'm interested now because when I hear about these deals, it usually comes through like on a press release or something. Like someone let me know, like a WM, yeah, we acquired Stericycle. Here it is. I'm like, wow, this is a big deal. When you guys are getting these phone calls building up to that, are you like, whoa, this person is trying, this is going this way? Does anything surprise you anymore in this space?
Yeah, at times, actually, to be honest with you. Yeah, I think the multiples remain really impressive. I think, to Jim's point, there's certainly fragmentation in the industrial space, but once you get past a big deal like an Arcwood, like a Triumvirate, you're gonna have to come way, way down market to kind of continue to find value and tuck in assets there. And so I'm really intrigued by that on the kind of fixed space facility has side, because those are really, really scarce assets. And there's not a lot more capacity out there on the independent side for like these guys to go out and buy. I mean, the other one that shocks me, honestly, is some of the stuff that's happening with industrial and field services. These are great businesses, but it's a labor and field service enabled and project-based business in a lot of cases. And it's interesting how capital is chasing that without that fixed space facility model in mind. We've seen some again, great businesses trade at really impressive prices kind of in and around that space. And I'm always surprised when there's no ultimate disposal asset attached to them, to see kind of still the appetite and kind of trying to understand ultimately, like, hey, well, are people underwriting because they're going to go grow transportation, grow more labor-based field services without that fixed base facility around it. That remains kind of a surprise to me when I see these announcements.
Cool. All right. So you mentioned valuations there a little bit. So, and I keep hearing about these premium valuations from high quality platforms. What specifically separated the winners from the rest of the pack, you think?
When you say winners, what do you mean? Like the number, the deals are trading at notably higher
Yeah,
value?
Yeah, let's go that route.
Okay. I think Sam just alluded to it. In all honesty, I think it's the fixed base facilities, it's the permits, it's that create those moats, if you will, right? And really separate and create kind of that unique angle, that unique capability relative to their competitors in the market, right? And so like a deal like a Triumvirate, which had just an extensive list of frankly highly permitted facilities versus a business providing the similar front end field service side. And this is kind of what Sam was getting to. That traded for a much higher value than your pure in-plant industrial cleaning services business. Those are still going for really attractive multiples, frankly. But it's what really separates the value there is the permits and just the scarcity of those permits. So to have a portfolio of high has fixed facility permits is crazy valuable. And to Sam's point, right? There's just as one more gets picked up, there's one fewer right to go out and acquire. And there's so few of these now that having a hazardous waste permitted facility is incredibly valuable.
Yeah, I'd say the other piece, and it reaches a little further into kind of the value chain, especially when you're looking more in the lower middle market and away from kind of the bigger announcements around a Triumvirate or around a Heritage, is ultimately how operators are using, quite frankly, a lot of tech in those businesses to kind of maximize return on asset and maximize their efficiency of what they're doing in the field from a labor and an equipment standpoint. And so the ones that I would say are differentiated from our perspective, at least, is people that have allowed themselves to have true visibility, measurable KPIs, and things that they're coming back during the process and saying, hey, like, we told you this is what we were going to do, midway through, here are the results. And, between, again, managing the fleet really well so that everything from, hey, my maintenance and my on-time service is there, to keeping people safe that are in the field, and as importantly, working within an hours band that's both compliant and safe for those people. Like, that's a pretty remarkable differentiator. And I think it's something that a lot of entrepreneurs, when they kind of get down the path in a process, some of them get it, some of them might not necessarily get it, but it's a worthy investment when you look at kind of, hey, if I'm gonna look at something that's kind of a higher value asset, that's something that we're going to want to dig into and understand.
Cool. Now I'm curious, and I'm not a business guy, so like putting these questions together, I was like, all right, I gotta figure some stuff out. So like, bear with me on some of these. Add-on acquisitions still driving growth, correct?
Yep.
So how important is organic performance right now compared to pure roll-up strategies?
Yeah, I would say it's very important. Quite frankly, I think it kind of dovetails into the last point on technology, but I think there's a lot that sales forces within, a small, mid-sized solid waste company, for example, can leverage in terms of how they're mining SEO, how they're using a tool like a Trash Bolt, for example, to go out and grab subscription residential customers. How, quite frankly, and it's not a knock remotely on the brokerage model, but how they're figuring out, educating their sales forces and putting them in a way to be successful on a direct basis, to go out and spend time on the road, door to door, winning customers and grabbing more permanent work in that way. So I think organic growth is critical. Obviously, looking at price at a very granular level too, and looking at kind of where your revenue mix is. The tools that are at the disposal for the waste companies today are just phenomenal. Like, I love the arrival of technology in this space from a routing and from a customer acquisition standpoint. So organic growth is critical. On the M&A side, it's as important. I think it does come back to how to value expectations on revenue mix. Sometimes there's a disconnect, I would say, between what someone has in a market. And this has shifted, I think, a lot over the last 5 or 10 years, even when for a period of time, you had a lot of companies that were really strong in municipal contracts, and that was a really exciting, stable enterprise. And now suddenly, quite frankly, you see C&D companies that are commanding premium values in the market. It wasn't the case a long time ago, but I
That's
think
good advisory work there, Sam.
exactly. But no, I think they're both relevant, for sure. Quite frankly, I think they're both still tools at the disposal of a capital provider like us to look at and fixate on. But I wouldn't discount one over the other.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And if anything, I think showing the organic growth of the business when we're going, signing up a new client and we're going to be taking this to market, right? There has to be the story that they've grown the business organically, and you can't just be all M&A. Frankly, doing a few deals going into a sale is important to show that there's the capability to not only go out, source, negotiate, execute, and integrate. Like that's important. But if there's no organic growth with the business, it's almost like window dressing to a business that Sam's probably going to pass on because right, like if the existing owners don't have a path forward on growing it organically, well, sure, we could do all the M&A we want, but it's kind of for nothing.
No,
And so
yes, totally agreed. And I think it comes back to too when you think about like how we look at an equity story from a long-term value perspective, and Jim's spot on. You can kind of see through that in a process pretty quickly. The organic growth tells the story of the fact that you've got a stable organization that's growing outside of M&A, and as importantly, quite frankly, the service is there, which is what someone also is going to in the long term, whether it's a strategic or an infra fund or a larger sponsor that ultimately becomes the next partner of the business when it goes through a sales cycle. Like they're going to want to know that the customers are serviced, the revenue base is stable, and the organic growth they secured wasn't on the basis of being lower priced operator, for example, that they did it with strong pricing and strong service to backstop it.
yeah.
Now, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I've only been in this industry for 3 years. And Sam, you had mentioned going to Waste Expo in 2008, which I can't even imagine right now. How has it been going to Waste Expo, seeing those companies then to seeing them now and being like, wow, they really blew up, or wow, the size of this booth is huge now because they own so many different things, or like, oh, that person's part of this now. What's it been like just from like I guess a attendee perspective on seeing how the business is going?
Yeah, Jim, you want to go?
Yeah, I've only been going since 2015, but I'll tell you what it's been like since then. Look, it's been amazing, frankly, to watch. It's been really cool to be a part of some of those stories, honestly, right? And to see folks like Sam and his team and the team at Kinderhook, right, getting a hold of some of these businesses and just in growing them as much as they have, right? Like the artist formerly known as Cards and Ecowaste, right? That's what we're going with now.
Yep.
I saw Rob's story earlier today. And so Ecowaste business, right? Like that story and that build up and what that's become is so neat to see. Capital Waste is another one, right? And so these guys have had a lot of success and who have had kind of that unique perspective of knowing them well and seeing how the sausage is made to a certain extent, right? Has been really, really fascinating to see. And you get to know some of the folks, right, that are on the floor that are building these businesses up, and you become fans of the story of theirs, and you're rooting for them, honestly. Like that's at the end of the day, we value relationships more than anything, and I think that you start to build these relationships and these rapport, and you see these people every year at this event. Well, now it'll be every other year at this event, and it's honestly it's awesome. It's really fun to see. It was really cool to see just how big Expo's gotten in the 9. I guess now it would have been 10 years last year. If my math is right. I'm not a math guy, right? But it's been that's the coolest part I think about the transformation and makes frankly my time in this industry thus far.
And I totally agree with that. I think what's been pretty cool is there have been some stories just in the last decade. You look at, candidly, I remember meeting Josh Connell at LRS in 2012 when they were kind of going out and doing their first capital raise to where that business has grown today. Absolutely amazing story, obviously, of what they started with in Chicago and how they were able to, grow the business, vertically integrate, expand into new markets. It's just been a great story. Brendan Pantano at Coastal, that is a absolutely amazing story of how that business has grown. And he has done a phenomenal job investing in tech, investing in fixed base facilities, and building a great team. I think the other piece of it too is you've got, this really interesting evolution with folks that are younger that I first met when they were younger operators inside of a WM or a Connections or a Republic that are now either off building their own business or kind of on the path to more senior leadership inside those organizations. And that continuity is pretty exciting to watch. And again, there's kind of cycles that move through as people build a company, sell it, wait out a non-compete, and go back into a market or go expand into a new market, which is, always interesting to hear those stories and see that play out too.
Yeah. I think that is cool. And I think from that perspective, it's really fun to see, just kind of knowing the inside baseball at all and just kind of see it happen and come together. And you're just like, yeah, this is what we're all here for. All right. Let's look at 2026. How much is technology like automation, routing software, data systems becoming a valuation driver rather than just something that's nice to have for these companies?
Yeah, it's critical from our perspective. So I think understanding on the automation side to start, are you in a market that allows you to automate in a customer base that's receptive to the idea of bringing the can out to the curb and putting it so you can dump it in a Corrado can or dump it in an ASL? But automating routes is an enablement for driving great safety, driving more route efficiency, quite frankly, driving a much more improved service operation from our perspective. You're obviously making an investment in the equipment, but quite frankly, I'd love seeing operators, even whether it's a smaller or a larger one, who are like, hey, I'm putting this in and I understand the return and the economics associated with it, at the onset. So from our perspective, automation is great. The same would go for tech. I think it's been, you look at kind of the both routing and billing software systems that have come in and out of this industry over the years. You've got a couple of options out there that all have great parts and terrible parts at the same time.
We won't mention any names. Yeah.
Without singling anybody out. But what I would say to you is the data layers that you can start to look at and how to kind of optimize your revenue and also obviously keep great service. Those investments are phenomenal. And it also means that, from our vantage point, if we're looking at an acquisition, likewise, the person believes in that story and they're able to focus on how can I gain the most efficiency? How can I drive the most yield? And then as I grow, as importantly, how do I create that connective tissue to be scaled effectively? So big believers. And from our vantage point, it's something that we really value at the onset, because when you have to step in and do it likewise, put aside the cost of it, there could be a massive upfit in margin, but negotiating against myself, a seller can command a premium value when they've made those investments. So,
and honestly, to dovetail on that last part by Sam, right, is when we get involved in a process and the data is there, it makes our job that much easier because we're able to position the business appropriately to drive on the value, which is really to control the waste in inbound, outbound pricing, price per ton, price per gallon, whatever the unit might be. Having the data and the visibility, and that's all driven on the technology stack that's supporting the backbone of the business anyways. And then he made a point around safety. There's usually some pretty early tells on how quality of a business it really is. And safety is easily one of those kind of initial kind of KPIs, if you will, that we're looking for. And when you can leverage safety or technology into improving safety, giving you the data, near misses, et cetera, like technology is massively important in terms of driving value.
Yeah. So stay up on all of your technology companies out there.
Right.
Do what you got to do. Spend the money. All right. And I'm curious, another, I guess, section of that is, we're seeing sustainability capabilities, regulatory tailwinds. How important are those factors when influencing deal strategy?
Regulatory tailwinds. So I honestly, this is an area that we get questions on a lot, is how important. I mean, the tailwinds are there. I mean, yes, it may be less or more loosely enforced, if you will, but nobody, just because of a change in administration or an edict from, the EPA, is going to say, okay, I can dump my waste in the lake. Like, it's right. There's usually a high bar set, and most good operators are adhering to that high water mark or that high bar. Right. And so, certain new constituents, waste constituents, whether it be the PFASs of the world, right? Those are creating additional revenue opportunities, pricing opportunities for some of our special waste clients. And so regulations are usually a good thing for our industry, and when it comes to values as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think you want to potentially even bifurcate it. So go between what's happening in the solid waste world, like from a collection standpoint versus ultimately then managing the ops you have on post collection. Jim alluded to PFAS being, obviously it's a regulated and complex kind of contaminant to deal with. It's a challenge for a lot of landfills. It's also an investment opportunity for them to figure out, all right, how can we manage this stream and also make sure we're obviously charging to manage that stream appropriately. Same on the industrial and has world. I don't think you have some shifting generator base that wants to make moves to kind of treat and manage those chemicals differently. I think everybody looks and aims for compliance. And quite frankly, from our perspective, when we partner with someone, particularly in that space, you kind of go in and people sometimes have this perspective that you're adverse to regulators. It's like you're not at all. If anything, we're always kind of intrigued and happier meeting someone who's like, hey, like I work with, if it's the Ohio EPA or I work with the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Quality, like I'm focused on having a strong relationship and rapport with my regulator versus being, adverse to them, quite frankly. I think the sustainability initiatives, and this kind of dovetails into something that Jim and I worked on a while ago. We worked on a deal called Chemtron, and they were candidly kind of at the forefront of managing and creating non-hazardous fuels from pre and post consumer products that came out of a bunch of different industrial manufacturing operations. And that was an initiative that I think was exciting. And you're seeing how that's growing in the market over the last 10 years. VLS is a dominant player in that space now. They've built a tremendous kind of non-haz fuel program. Obviously, Reworld, we ultimately were building it out at Circon through that umbrella. But I think it's something that has a lot of value from a generator perspective. I think it fits in really nicely with some of the kind of regulatory goals that are happening kind of across the federal and state EPAs by seeing that kind of beneficial reuse and recovery from waste. And on top of it, from an energy efficiency perspective, there's a lot to be excited about with kind of the long term as we look to, hey, how do we migrate away in some cases from coal operations and recover real BTU value from a lot of different waste streams. And that's definitely valued. It's valued by our limited partners that are focused on how you can kind of drive more beneficial reuse. The one other one I'd say is EPR, which I'm sure you guys are thinking about, just coming back to solid waste. But we're seeing that increasingly pop up in a bunch of different states. Obviously, Canada has gotten kind of further in front of that. But the EPR regs are, I don't think they're going away. And so I think it's an opportunity, quite frankly, for a lot of solid waste management companies to work with states to kind of reinvent how we look at recycling and creating that connective tissue to recovery, but as importantly, getting a fee for service on the basis. So.
Great.
And I just want to say thank you to Sam because that we're putting together a research report right now. So you just previewed our next research report on EPR.
Check that out. Exclusive.
People helping people, Jim.
I love it. Thank you, Sam.
Awesome. All right, guys, let's talk. My last question, and we'll just kind of direct it at the listeners here who might be interested in this. Someone's listening and they're expecting or wanting to go to market in the next 12 to 24 months. What are the top things they should start doing right now to prepare?
Yeah, I would say begin getting your data organized, right? I think that's massively important, and otherwise you end up chasing yourself throughout a process. And I honestly, I think that the one thing that would be most important is you talking to other operators that have gone through that process. The process of selling your business is a tedious one. There's a lot of not only just data, but just time commitment involved. And so understanding that going into it is in talking to others who have gone through it is massively, massively important to knowing what you're walking into and also getting out ahead of it and being prepared. Preparation is key, quite honestly. It really is.
Yeah,
I'll stand with you later on that. But.
No. I agree with that. I mean, we've all done the shoebox hunt on deals where you've got something really great, but there's a little bit of a want for organization. I'll put something else out there, or there are probably two things out there. One is I think a lot of people struggle at times to put pen to paper that's in their head if they're an entrepreneur in particular about how they're going to grow and build their business. And, you obviously have great partners like Jim at BGL who can help extract that information. But even ahead of that meeting, doing some real mapping and saying, hey, here's how I see the equity story and the growth story playing out in my business, and thinking about truly what, as hokey as it might sound, the 3 and the 5 year goal for the business is and how you're actually going to achieve that. That's incredibly critical. And what you don't want is it to, no knock on bankers, but you don't want it to be in banker speak. Because the last thing anybody wants is to sit in a meeting and it's like, oh, this is being articulated just as a banker wrote it on paper. I think it's really important that as an operator, you have those building blocks there. There's also something else about kind of the cadence of budgeting and planning, which kind of ties into that process. So totally agree with Jim about how do you prep and get your data and really feel confident in the information you're putting on paper. If it's a strategic looking at it, they're going to look at every KPI in your business from a net revenue per hour and a cost per hour basis. And so that in and of itself has its own demands. But as importantly, with that planning around your growth plan, like how do I, put down on paper how I'm going to achieve this budgeted goal vis-a-vis price, vis-a-vis volume, this acquisition is going to fall into the fold. And here's why I think I have a great angle on it. It's one that, again, we've all been in processes, Jim and I both, and it's all over the board at times. But that's a really, really critical one in addition to kind of the tactical pieces of it. And look, wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't plug BGL, because having a good partner, that's critical. And there is a reason to make that investment, especially with someone who actually understands your industry and can help you prep that data, to Jim's point, in a way that's conveying what you need.
Thank you, Sam. And just to piggyback on something he just said as well, yes, we can craft your growth story for you and tell you what to say, but folks like Sam are going to see right through it. So know your plan, know what your value add is, know why you win, right? Like that's one of our questions when we're sitting there on a kickoff meeting is, well, why do you win? And it could just be because you're better at service, but that's usually not the best answer. There's always a reason, like very nuanced reasons as to what makes your business unique. And knowing that and being able to articulate that it goes a long way, frankly, in those conversations with potential acquirers of the business. It really does.
Wise words, everyone, for all those listeners I know who are ready to contact both of you. Okay, so that is the end of my questions there. I will throw it to you guys just in case we didn't cover anything today that you thought would be paramount to go over. Anything coming to you guys that you're like, we should get this out. This is important to know for everyone at home.
Jim?
No, nothing's jumping out. I'll be honest with you. No.
If you want to razz him about what were you guys talking about? TRX and something else? What was that again?
Yeah. I mean, he says he's got a faster truck than mine, but we all know that it's not, I'll be honest with you.
I'm seeing it now. Waste Expo 2027, Jim Cocita, Sam Keenan, the truck race to end them all.
That's not fair. It gives Sam too much time to get his. He's more of a. He can turn the wrench. I can't. I got to outsource mine.
Hateful, man. Hateful. No, we'll make that happen. It could be a desert race. I actually like that idea.
Ooh, I do like that idea. I like that idea.
Anything to keep my job interesting and entertaining, so I'm all for it. All right, so that's it there for then. I guess if people are interested in reaching out to you guys for more information, kind of maybe learning about what the next steps for them are, how can they reach out?
Yeah, so be reached through LinkedIn, obviously, through the website. I think all of my contact information is out there. And then anybody who wants to talk to Sam, just call us and we'll gladly connect you to him.
Yeah, likewise. If you go to kinderhook.com, we've got our contact info out there, and always happy to chat.
Excellent, guys. Well, thank you for joining me today. Thank you for putting up with. I only had to mute like 4 times to get through coughs. I'm fighting back a sneeze right now. So if I don't end this, I'm going to lose it. All right. Well, thank you again for joining me.
Thanks, Gage. Feel better, buddy. Appreciate it, guys.
Take care. See ya.
See ya.
Okay, that wraps up today's episode of the Waste World Podcast. Big thank you again to Jim and Sam for walking us through the state of environmental services M&A area and what buyers and investors are prioritizing right now, how operators can position themselves for success heading into 2026, and more. Hopefully you found it insightful. I know I did. It's always nice to bring people on here every week to learn something. I feel like I'm learning something every week, and we should be learning something every day. So I'm helping you with 1/7 of the week. You got to do the rest. And if you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, of course. Leave us a review. Check us out on waste360.com for more industry news, analysis, and event coverage. And if you want to stay up to date on future episodes, make sure you follow us on our podcasting services. Also follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, or X, whatever you're calling it. and I think that's the social media we have. We post about these episodes there. You can get the updates right as they happen. Sign up for our newsletter because the episode goes right in the top of the newsletter. That's it. Make sure you tell a friend about us. And if you don't, I want to tell my friends about you. Isn't that like a weird threat to have to somebody you don't know that I'm just talking to? That like you listen to the show, you've heard me talk. Now you're worried, who's he going to tell about me? What could he tell about me? Don't think about it too hard. My name is Gage Edwards. Thanks for listening. And remember, it's our world. Let's not waste it.
3, 2,